Beginnings. First authorized with an appropriation of $100,000 by the Nebraska legislature in 1885 on 40 acres donated by the community of Beatrice. This facility began in a 3.5-story multi-purpose structure that became known as Old Main. Located just east of the original school and today's food service, the building housed administrative offices, dormitories for both individuals served, and staff and classrooms and kitchen, which were raised in 1953. The facility opened its doors in 1887 for the first admissions, a 13-year-old girl and a 17-year-old boy from Superior. Although the girl is officially listed number 1, the story is told that the boy was actually to be admitted first, but gallantly stepped aside to let the girl precede him. Whether the story is oral history or charming legend, Arthur Orion Rossman became a messenger around campus as well as an accomplished artist. Two examples of his gifted artist talent are displayed there. School days. Most students aged 5 through 18 attended school from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in classroom on top of the 2 floors of Old Main. Instructional methods were based on modification of the kindergarten model first advocated in 1837, which held that a child developed impulses internally and parents and teachers should facilitate this natural process, an early manifestation of what we now call the developmental approach. A repeated request for separate school building resulted in a 3-story red brick structure in 1916. Approximately 200 students were taught the 3 R's, a little geometry, and some history, industrial arts, drill, singing, and band through 5th grade level. Arts and ceramics were added in the early 1940s, and in 1945, a new occupational therapy department taught 92 students carpet weaving and toy making, while the barber and beauty shops were established as part of the vocational training. Older male students were trained to repair furniture, upholster, and do caning, while female students not in the school learned dressmaking and sewing. They all made drapes and curtains around campus. A white frame annex north of the school, built in 1964, and vacating and remodeling the S building 2 years later, provided more classrooms for a record enrollment of 440 in 1973. As the facility's population later decreased, the traditional classroom approach became less appropriate for those remaining. The school closed in 1983. Today, all center citizens receive educational and training service on living units and in training areas across the campus, with some students attending schools. 1916. The first involuntary sterilization law had been enacted by Indiana in 1907. 1916. The Beatrice Home for Feeble-Minded Youth. The first involuntary sterilization law had been enacted by Indiana in 1807. In 1916, Nebraska state law made surgical sterilization of institutionalized persons a prerequisite for release from the facility and to return to the community. Based on faulty genetic assumptions that ignored the real causes of mental retardation, such as malnutrition, alcohol, drug and tobacco abuse during pregnancy, inadequate care of children in infancy or early childhood, birth defects, etc., the procedure was later determined to constitute a violation of fundamental rights. The practice was discontinued at this facility in 1965, 2 years before the Gage County District Court held that sterilization laws were unconstitutional. However, only 4 of 7 Nebraska Supreme Court justices agreed. 5 or more was required. and by the time sterilization laws were finally repealed by the full majority of the state Supreme Court in 1970, more than 750 individuals had been subject to this procedure. Bursting at the seams, an initial age of optimism that saw institutions as temporary and transitional had given way to an era of which individuals with mental retardation were widely regarded either as eternal children or poor unfortunates to be sheltered, or as immoral and criminal-prone menaces to society from which it needed protection. Both attitudes led to regarding institutionalized persons as more or less permanent wards of the state, with a corresponding expansion and overcrowding of facilities. As institutions grew, so did the public and political pressure to keep rising costs down at often the expense of comfort, privacy, and quality of services for individuals served. This facility's population had mushroomed to an all-time peak of 2,236 people on campus as of May 1966, with just a staff of over 550. A 4-person served to 1 staff ratio, including all personnel on all 3 shifts, that could provide more than minimal custodial care. Nationwide, more than 200,000 individuals subsisted in similar conditions, in spite of the best efforts of employees. Facing a challenge of staggering proportions, this area of human or inhuman warehousing constitutes the bleakest days in the history of mental retardation services and in the lives of those individuals who deserve to be served better. Overcrowding. Overcrowding and lack of behavioral techniques sometimes led to shortcuts for controlling problem standards and behaviors that seemed antiquated or even inhumane by today's standards. Individuals who acted up were sometimes deprived of personal possessions or food, confined in shackles or canvas straitjackets that could cause bruising, and even sentenced to jail wards. Such methods were sometimes applied arbitrarily or even in anticipation of misbehavior, such as preventing individuals from running away. Heads of both male and female runaways were shaved as punishment and deterrent until 1955, when the practice was forbidden by M. Eller Wyatt, newly appointed superintendent. Chronic misbehaviors were sometimes chemically restrained by experimental psychotropic drugs and sometimes administered in what is known now to be excessive doses. A dialogue worth remembering. Father, how could we have treated them like that? The first step, my son, was to learn to say us and them. After that, it was easy. Winds of change. Winds of change swept across the plains when a KETV crew visited this facility in 1968. In a telecast titled Out of the Darkness, anchorman Lee Terry described the individuals at the facility as physically healthy but emotionally starved and living in a limbo of bedlam. Proving again that a picture is worth 1,000 words, footage showed individuals wandering aimlessly, sitting on barren floors and one shackled to a bed. Focusing public attention on the staff's impossible task of trying to meet even the minimal needs of too many individuals with too few resources, Out of the Darkness gave heightened credibility and urgency to calls for reform from both within and outside the facility. Turning apathy into action and helping pave the way for progress, funding requested by the facility for years soon became available. Within a year, teaching staff increased to 40, including 15 certified teachers and aides. Vocational rehabilitation efforts, which had already found outside jobs for more than 700 over the preceding decade, were intensified. The new medical services building opened in 1968 to enhance health care that included a new physical therapy department that in its first year assisted more than 20 youngsters bedridden in the infirmities to walk for the first time. Robert F. Kennedy comes to the Beatrice State Home. In May of 1968, 21 days before his assassination in Los Angeles. A view of the Institute as it appeared around 1900 looking north. In the center, left of the standpipe, Old Main, which was built in 1877 and raised in 1953. To the right of Old Main, 400 Kennedy Boulevard of the S Building, built in 1988 as a men's residence. To the right of the S Building, the R Building, built as a boys' cottage, which was raised in 1976. To the left of Old Main is the first hospital built in 1900 and used as employee apartments. This was raised in 1967. And to the left of the hospital, Armstrong Hall, built in 1982, W Building as a girls' cottage, was raised in 1971 and named after first superintendent 1886 to 1896. This ledger includes the names of the very first persons admitted to the facility in 1887. Listed second is Arthur Orion Rossman, known as the Artist. Rossman's charcoal sketches are proudly displayed above in this display case as a tribute to his remarkable artistic talent. Next to the sketches, photograph believed to be of Rossman himself. Believe it or not, handcuffs lined with sheepskin or soft leather represented an advance over metal cuffs, which could bruise or otherwise injure a person being restrained. Today, a behavioral approach is preferred. Restraints are used only for a short time when absolutely necessary and approved by authorized personnel. This is the original book, ledger. At the top it says Register of Inmates. On these pages are the first people admitted to the Beatrice State Home, starting on May 25th of 1887. The cause is listed, the name, the age, the sex, the date of admission, who admitted them, the relationship, and the reason. Here we have reasons for admission. Here we have the cause of death by some of the patients, such as epilepsy, typhoid, bruising of the brain, kidney failure, drowning, tuberculosis, tonsillitis, rheumatoid arthritis. And then on this side it gives the remarks such as where the remains went. Here we have the actual top of the page, the Nebraska Institution for Feeble-Minded Youth. On this side we have the Register of Inmates. Here is an interesting entry. A family of 5, actually 6, age 2, 15, 17, 13, 10, and the mother who was 47 years old. This family was registered as inmates at the Beatrice State Home on January 24th, 1933. They spent over 6 years in the Beatrice Institution for Feeble-Minded Youth. They were all discharged on parole. However, one, David Fleming, who was 2 years old in January 24th, 1933, was just discharged April 10th, 1980, spending over 47 years at the Nebraska Institution for Feeble-Minded Youth. As you can see the ages, 47, 10, 13, 17, 15, and 2. David Fleming was 2 years old, January 24th, 1933, and was discharged April 10th, 1980. Discharged on placement. Here is a family under the Register of Inmates at the Nebraska Institution for Feeble-Minded Youth. The father, noted, was 50 years old, a male. His wife, 46. Their son, 16. Their daughter, 13. Their daughter, 6. And Henry, who was 3. They were admitted December 8th, 1936. "20 years later, at the age of 70, the father was dismissed. 10 years later, in 1945, the mother was dismissed, and the other children were dismissed anywhere from 10 to 20 years later. This is the Beatrice State Home as it appeared in 1960. This is the museum giving a detailed history of the Beatrice State Home. Programs like this 1944 Halloween party were held in the auditorium, the third floor of the main school. For years, this area was also used for church services. In this book are the names of over 3,500 people that were incarcerated at the Beatrice State Home and later paroled. Many of these people, most of them, the majority, had committed no crimes. They were just poor, unwanted, or vagrants. Over 700 were sterilized as a prerequisite for their release. Many of these people came into the Beatrice State Home for Feeble-Minded Youth at the age of 2, 3, or 4, along with their parents, who were jailed as inmates, held as inmates. Some 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, these people would still be at the Beatrice State Home for Feeble-Minded Youth. There was no court proceedings, there was no convictions, only incarceration and forced sterilization as part of their release.